And while we're on the topic of immortality, here I am a few hours later, still drawing Ellen Beldotan from Tzfat. In our last two discussions, we touched on, in the first discussion, the fact that immortality is not only possible, but Hashem gave us the Torah to teach us to do exactly that, how to become immortal in our bodies. In the second discussion, we spoke about the ways in which people issue directives to their bodies to go into self-destruction mode, and that is the reason why people die. In this video, please God, we will speak about the way in which immortality is cultivated and how we arrive at it. Like all biological processes, we have to grow into it, and we continuously grow into it. Even after we've attained it, we grow further into it, and in a more developed kind of way. There is one way in which we sabotage our immortality that I did not touch on in the last discussion, and it is so important that I do want to briefly talk about it here. And that is the idea of symbolism and ceremonies in religion. The Jews do this rampantly. There's a lot of it in Catholicism as well too. I must say that the Protestants are pretty good about not being concerned much about symbolism. Why is symbolism bad? When we use our real body to simulate what our bodies are actually doing, thinking that we're talking about someone else or somewhere else, or people of such high stature that we can't possibly try to emulate them, so we just do it in a symbolic kind of a way. All of that makes our real bodies do imaginary synthetic things. And that takes us out of the world. The reason why I began to make this series of videos in English is because I heard rabbis saying we have to prepare ourselves spiritually for Rosh Hashanah. And I said, enough is enough with this nonsense. For those who do not know, and I'm talking specifically now to the rabbis, the expression Rosh Hashanah is equal to 861, which is the value of Beit HaMikdash, which is the Holy Temple. If we want the Holy Temple to be built, we don't prepare ourselves spiritually. We prepare ourselves physically. We prepare our bodies to be able to endure a more intense experience of godliness in actuality, in the form of our very own being, our very own bodies, as well as our consciousness. This is the way we prepare for Rosh Hashanah. And by the way, those who prepare that way for Rosh Hashanah find that they are living Rosh Hashanah every day. Yesh le yom yom chag. So the idea of carrying out symbolic acts, ceremonies, for instance, on Rosh Hashanah, the table is filled with different foods, and this is symbolic of this, and this is symbolic of that, and there you are eating with your actual body, and your body is doing all of these holy things that you're being symbolic about. And that is the absolute absurdity of this. And this is what removes you from the world and makes you fodder for the maggots. How do we cultivate immortality? The very first thing that we do, even before we know that this is possible, the very, very first thing that we do is pray that we come to a true and genuine understanding of Torah. The expression pרוש נכון, which means a correct interpretation, is equal to 1,362, which is the same thing as 363, which is Hamasiach. Mashiach is not someone else. Mashiach is who we are when we arrive at a correct interpretation of Torah. And notice it doesn't say HaPerush HaNachon. It's not the one correct interpretation, but we have to arrive at a correct interpretation. Those who arrive at a correct interpretation know that they have reached this stature that is called HaMashiach. Those who are still waiting for HaMashiach to arrive are those who have not arrived at a correct interpretation of Torah. And speaking of time, the word chai, which means to be alive in the singular masculine, which is part of Mashiach, that word is also contained in Mashiach, it equals 18. And one of the substitution values for chai, meaning alive, is bahove, which means in the present. Not long ago I listened to a lecture by a rabbi, and he was quoting another Rav, one of his teachers, who said that the Jewish people are a people with a past and a future, but not a present. And when he said that, it pained me. It pained me deeply, because I know that the present, bahove, is chai. And what he was essentially saying is that the Jews are existing as phantoms, because they're either dwelling on the past or projecting themselves into the future, not living in the present. And that is precisely what I am trying to say. The way in which the Jews, the rabbinic school of Jews, have interpreted Torah is not in the present. It is not living. It is not actual. It is an ersatz. It is a simulation. And basically they're a bunch of fake Jews. I mean, that they may be genetically really Jewish, but they're not living an authentic Torah life. Everything by them is symbolic. And that is precisely how we take ourselves out of the world, by making our very real living body in the present concern itself, think about, concern itself, talk about things in the past, things in the future, but be dissociated from itself in the present. And this is precisely what the rabbis do, and this is what they taught the Christians to do. This, don't think that Christianity fixed this. If anything, it's worse. So what is important is to live actually and to live in the present, and not to conduct ceremonies, and to understand Torah correctly. These are basic things that we must do in order to begin to transform our bodies into internalize eternal truth, and in the internalization of eternal truth, when we think, we cause chemical reactions. There's a chemical cascade that occurs in the body when we think, when we speak, when we do anything. If we are engaged in truth at that time, the chemical cascade that occurs is going to strengthen that flesh to be able to withstand the influx of a higher level of truth and get stronger. And it's very much like building our muscles. We have to build our body to be able to withstand more and more intense influxes of truth, and we go up gradually in truth. This is not something, you don't go from 0 to 60. You have to do this incrementally, and that can take years, decades, lifetimes. But this is our thrust, the strengthening of our bodies. One of the things that we must do in order to attain immortality is to realize and reaffirm, excuse me, to ourselves that our bodies are every bit as holy as our consciousness. And that means all of our bodies. One of the things that the rabbis taught, I spoke about that the body is impure. And I want to address this because this is of the utmost importance to understand. Our bodies traverse the highest heavens down to the bowels of hell. And it must be that way. It must be that one and the same human being can consider the most exalted, infinite conceptions of peace, to actualize peace in infinity, and at the very, very same time, their bowels are digesting their food, and they may need to go pee-pee cocky, and to understand that both are holy. It is in the depths of our bowels that we carry out digestion and absorption. And this is as holy gets. And I'm going to let you in on a secret, boys and girls. The story of the Exodus from Egypt, and I've proven this in a number of chilufim, that in the substitution values that are on Facebook, talk about two things: the birth process and also moving one's bowels. The word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, which is equal to 940. That is the same value as the word Karkeshet, which is the lower bowel that leads to the anus. And Exodus is the word Yitziah in Hebrew. That is also vacating one's bowels, is also called Yitziah. So the highest of the holy things is connected, must necessarily be connected to the lowest levels of physicality. And we must not deny either one for the sake of the other. We can't get all involved in our kaki, because that's like ichsa, right? There are people that have like this kind of like nuttiness. That's nuts. But it is equally nuts to constantly be like, I'm a rarefied being, and you know, completely oblivious to what's going on in one's own body, which is exactly where we take the food and take those complex compounds, break them down, and rearrange them into our living body, which I've said is the exact same process of learning Torah. In other words, your bowels are doing physically what your consciousness is doing with Torah. When you can connect those two so that they are not separate functions, but fully integrated, you have built the bridge between the highest heavens and the bowels of hell. And then there's no more contradiction between the two. You realize that the one necessarily flows from the other. And by the way, we know that there is a center of intelligence in our gut, which is constantly informing our brain. And our brain is in communication with that area of intelligence. This is important to know because this makes people accepting of their bodies. We shouldn't think that our bodies are completely unclean because we process food and excrement and urine the way we do. That's also where our bodies are being built out of. That is what is allowing our heart to work and our brains to work and our consciousness to be able to consider the most exalted regions of truth. So these things are not disconnected. In fact, the rabbis have very, very mistakenly thought that the work of the Kohanim, the work of the priests, is ceremonial work. The truth of the matter is that the name Aharon, Aaron, 906, is Tavech, which means within. Tavech means within. And Kohen, which is 725, is Hame'ayim, which means the intestines. Our bodies are always carrying out the holy work of HaKohanim in our own intestines. When one purifies one's speech, what happens, and when one purifies one's diet, it's very, very important that we eat in a way that is loving for our bodies and keeps our gut as clean as possible. Then that whole pipeline becomes purified to the maximum level possible. And that is very, very important. People find that when they become vegan, their learning of Torah just skyrockets because their guts get cleaned out a lot. So it's important to know that our highest faculties and our lowest faculties are fully dependent and integrated one in the other, and the one is not more necessary in order to do the holy work than is the other. Thinking is not more holy than what your Hagas, large intestine, does. Another thing that we need to do in order to be able to attain immortality is to do work that is of real service. I can't say enough about this. It is so important to do the work that we love, to do that is of service to the creation, that puts into practice the gifts that God has given us, the particular gifts, what we're really good at, that make other people happy and serve other people and give people what they need, so that when a person is doing their job, they should always be serving God. This is prayer with your entire body. When we do the work that we are meant to do, that will help others, that will make others joyful, there is no higher level of prayer than service, utilizing our abilities and doing it in holiness, making money honestly, producing a product that is worth having in the world, that means something, that will foster life, that will make our lives more beautiful. Everybody does this to some extent, and that is why even those who don't attain the knowledge of immortality when they die, and if they leave their body behind, their body still has an imprint of the holiness that they have done in their lives, even if they haven't become fully conscious that their body is actually the living God. And that imprint becomes part of the entire universe when their body decomposes, and it recomposes in some form. A person will come back in another form in different combinations of different people and different beings that need to be rectified. But unfortunately, if we don't attain immortality while we are alive, one of the things that happens is that we lose the memories of who we were. We lose that continuity. And although, again, that is not completely lost, it can be I can't think of the word. It can be brought back into existence. I'm sorry. I'm now not fluent in 2 languages. Reconstituted. It could be reconstituted, but piece by piece. It's like picking up shards of a ceramic or a glass vessel that has broken. You can put it back together again, but you're going to have to put it back together shard by shard, sliver by sliver, and that's very difficult. It's much better to attain immortality so that one goes on continuously and doesn't have their memories wiped out and then think that they're another person when they come back in different forms and have to put themselves together again piece by piece, which is a very difficult and painful process, and it's better avoided. In closing, I should like to say that in the last videos we discussed the fact that Sheba'al, which means oral, which is also the same letters as Shebepa'ala, which means activated. We're talking about now the oral Torah and the activated Torah, the Torah in actuality. Just those words Sheba'al or Shebepa'ala, written, oral or actuated, is 487, and that is the value of the word almoti, which means immortal. That same value, 487, is the value of the expression kol hatvel, which means all of the creation. That's all of the universe. So to be almoti, to be immortal, is to recognize the fact that our body actually is the entire universe. So you see these videos and you read these articles, and it talks about how big Andromeda is, and then how big the next galaxy is, and how big, far away it is, and and how big these stars are, and that. And then they say, doesn't that make you feel awfully small? I laugh when I see that, and I say, no, actually it makes me feel awfully big, because I know all of that is my body's. Ultimately of which it's my body, my one body. That's all, the entire tevel, the entire creation, the entire universe is our body, and we need to know that. Now, if I say Torah שבעל פה, or oral Torah, or Torah שבפעלה, actuated Torah, that value is 1098, which I've said, which is 99, which is Gufy, my body, or Gufai, my bodies. But because 487 is Kol HaTevel, the entire universe, when I say Torah שבעל פה, oral Torah, Torah שבפעלה, actuated Torah, what I'm actually saying is Torah Kol HaTevel. Torah is the entirety of the universe, and together that's the value 1098, which is Gufy. So if we're learning oral Torah correctly, we come to experience our body, which is Anochi Chai, I live. Anochi always is the I that relates to Hashem. Anochi Chai, I live. Anochi בהוה, I am in the present, and that is my body. I begin to experience myself as El Chai, as God living, this body, this consciousness together, wedded together in holy matrimony, and death does not separate us. Death quite actually is what binds us even completely together. When we both entered the world of truth together, my consciousness and my body, we formed an unbreakable bond. When I did not leave my body, when I began to understand these things, I kept actually expecting to die. I did, I really did. The learning was getting so high that I began to say to myself, wait a second, I've heard reports about people who learn this way, but they're all like in the next world. What am I doing here in my body? And it was hard to believe. I said, certainly I'm going to die, you know. And I remember saying, if I get to the next level, I'm going to leave my body. And then my body was able to withstand the new influx every time. The higher the truth got, the purer it got, the deeper the understanding got, the body was like right there. And I was like, whoa, you know, I don't have to leave. And one day I said, I don't have to leave you, do I? And I suddenly realized that the body had become one with my consciousness, and that it was able to tolerate infinity. Please God, may we all merit to have this experience, and this is the reason why I'm talking about this publicly, even though it's like a little embarrassing to really tell you the truth. So please God, in the next video, I want to explain what the telltale signs are, to describe them to you, so that you'll know that you passed the threshold, because we don't always know. People think that if you're dead, you know it. That's not true. You know that something has happened, but you don't know what it is. And when we pass the threshold into eternal truth, and we are dead in a body, the body begins to act differently. There are signs of that having happened that are as unmistakable as adolescence. And it helps if somebody can guide us and make us understand what's happening. Of course, there are immortals that guide us all the time, but they are in such high forms that it's not like sitting down over a cup of coffee with someone and talking on a human level, and as more human beings come into this state, there'll be more of a support group, because there'll be people that will be able to guide us that look like people, that whose forms we can recognize as like our own. And so please God, somewhere either between Shabbat and Yom Kippurim, or after Yom Kippurim, I'd like to make a video that describes the telltale signs of having entered Olam Emet, and that is the state that's called Nachat. Nachat is serenity, resting, peace. It is made up of two words, Chai, meaning living, and Met, which is dead, to be in the state of being both alive and dead at once, in a body, and being at peace with that eternal state. Thank you for listening.